For Sunday, July 9th, you found the Georgia gang. Topping our agenda today is Georgia finally getting serious about mass transit. A metro county is trending Democratic, and guess what? It's raising taxes. In the races for governor and mayor, money is the topic right now. Some of the stories up for grabs on the Georgia gang.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia gang starts now.
And we're glad you to be with us on this second weekend in July. With us is Theron Johnson, noted analyst. You are sitting in the tax chair for Alexis Scott. So you understand that when we get to local government, you will advocate all tax increases in all forms, okay?
I'm going to do my best to make sure that I continue Alexis' plight to make sure that this is a democracy. And
No, she doesn't want a democracy. She wants socialism. Come on. Come on.
Write that down.
She's not even here to
defend herself, guys.
Anyway, Jeff, this is your chance to be a centrist with Theron in the tax chair.
It's tough on this show.
Okay.
It's tough in our politics. All politics are extremes.
All right, so some things we know because we're told over and over again. We're told, for example, that Georgia is the only state in the union as a state that does not contribute to transit systems. You see how well that's worked out in places like New York and Illinois and Connecticut, where states contribute to transit systems, they go broke. That's probably not fair. The fact is, Georgia needs to look at it, and I'm somewhat surprised. David Ralston, the Speaker of the House, off our deadline last week, was really foursquare in terms of legislative look at transit systems, not just in Atlanta, but around the broader 15-county area. Jeff, is that a real significant move, or is it window dressing?
No, I think that it's a significant move when you hear state leaders talk about something that they've avoided funding and wanting to have much to do with for a long, long time. You had this divide, those two Georgias, right, between rural and urban, and the rural didn't want to have anything really all that beneficial for Metro Atlanta, or what they thought would benefit Metro Atlanta in a substantive way. And we've always had that divide. I think that it's beginning to break down in the Georgia legislature to the extent that they can now see that there is a need that needs to be filled. This is one of the first ones. I mean, we got GDOT and others talking about building tunnels under freeways. It's crazy. We've got to come to a solution, and one of those solutions has to be
I think it's interesting when David Ralston from Blue Ridge there understands it and appoints a pretty powerful commission, not a committee, a commission to look at transit. Casey Cagle did that, the lieutenant governor did that with the Senate about a year ago, as I recall. So now you've actually, we could speculate all day where it's headed, but I think with those two men in it, they are recognizing that half the population of the state is in the broader metro area, and they're going to have to spend some state money. That's a huge departure.
Well, as you just indicated, Dick, I mean, MARTA is the largest rail system in the country that does not have any state funding matching. And so David Ralston, Speaker Ralston, is to be commended. I mean, you may remember 3 years ago, he talked about expanding transit. But this commission that he put together that was very bipartisan, and really, for those of us who actually lobby at the Capitol, we actually know that the real work is really done when you're out of session. So for this speaker to come and say, hey, I want to put transit at the forefront, I want to expand it beyond this metro counties, I want to look at going south and even going a little bit more west and east, it's showing that this state is a progressive state, and that I think Democrats and Republicans are going to work together to expand transit.
Phil, weigh in on that for me, but then I'm going to change the subject.
Yeah, well,
I mean, when you were in Augusta, for example, all those years, you probably would have blanched at the idea that the state would spend money on, for example, MARTA.
Absolutely. I wrote editorials for 2 decades complaining that Atlanta was getting far too much money, and Augusta and everywhere else was shortchanged, to your point.
I didn't know that you were so much of the problem.
Except MARTA wasn't getting any money.
No, but it goes to your point about the rural-urban divide. A lot of community newspapers wrote those same editorials over the years. That's changing, though. And I would agree somewhat with your analysis, Theron, too. I mean, just as we all know, 1 million 1,000 people have been added in Atlanta over the last decade. So both parties, rightly so, are having to address the variations of transit. You mentioned mass transit now. There's other forms of transit, bus lines, you know, especially the expansion.
Well, how about passenger rail?
Passenger
how about
rail.
Athens, Macon, Columbus?
Yeah,
We've always looked at
corridor,
those,
a corridor, you know, the
right.
Clifton corridor that
Right.
we talked about.
The Clifton corridor,
So,
I think it's going to
so
happen.
I think both parties are recognizing pressure from their own constituents to have this.
Now let me stay with you because we got caught between deadlines here. But Georgia Power and Southern Nuclear, a subsidiary of the larger Georgia Power Company, are going to take over the Plant Vogtle nuclear plants and continue to build them. Two of them or one of them? Two reactors or one?
We're going, I think,
and
from what we hear,
Toshiba's going to pay them some money, maybe out of the bankruptcy that it's in.
not maybe, Toshiba, the parent company of Westinghouse, which went bankrupt, Toshiba is paying the money that they are contracted to pay. That's a huge relief for Georgia, for our whole electric reliability plan for the next 20 years. So I think we can breathe a little easier on this. I think Southern Nuclear is fully capable. They have a contract now with Westinghouse. They're taking over a lot of these Westinghouse duties, and so we're hoping that it's going to be a smooth transition. We'll know more on the timeline probably next month.
Yeah.
What was the purpose of the Attorney General, Chris Carr? I'm asking a question I don't know the answer to. What was the purpose of his saying that Georgia Power cannot stop collecting the fees from consumers to
Right.
build those plants?
Right, it's
I
an
didn't know
extra
there was any.
fee.
Why did he say that? Was
Well,
there-
it's a state law.
Well, I know, but who's challenging it?
Well, the state legislature a few years ago basically put in this state law that basically, and I
Right.
think it's called NCCR, which is the Nuclear Cost Construction Recovery. And so it's something that Georgia Power and others have to actually basically follow the law. So the legislative, along with the Attorney General's office, said, look, we can't stop collecting these fees, which, by the way, they will save consumers and taxpayers in the state of Georgia hundreds of millions of dollars over time. I mean, we may not see it now. So basically what he's saying is that these people don't want these NCCR costs, but because the legislature made the law and they have to enforce the law, they have to keep the same plan in place.
All right, here's a topic that makes my blood boil, but I'm going to just leave it to the three of you to sort it out. It seems to me like every activist group in the country is demanding voter information, private voter information. We've got the federal government seeking Georgia's voter records, or the Department of Justice, which implies something's wrong. Then we have the Trump administration, the president himself, wanting Georgia voter information. Why? What?
Well, let me break down one, and there's several facets
I know,
to
it's
this,
crazy.
but one of them is the purging of voters, and that's what the U.S. Justice Department is looking at.
That's justice, right?
Because, you know, a lot of times, and it is for fighting fraud. I think everyone would agree with that. Now, the
Well,
question
I'm not
is,
sure that the ranking Democrats in the state of
well,
Georgia would.
Well, the question is, when do you start purging? That's the big issue.
Looks to me like they give them a lifetime.
Well, and this is why we're trying to find out what's going on in Georgia and other states. I think if someone doesn't vote in 2 or 3 cycles, they are now subject to being purged. So that's the big debate on that one.
Well, go ahead, Joe.
Well, I just think that they're trying to nationalize our election system. I think that that's what Trump is
Thank
trying
you.
to do.
Well, thank
He's
you.
out there, you know, and it really is. You want to talk about states' rights. Here is a state prerogative. It's always been a state prerogative to have its own election system. We have 50 election systems in the United States. It's one of the things that really makes elections hard to engineer here because it's so dispersed, right? And now we've got a president in office who wants to back up an unsubstantiated claim that there was fraud in the presidential election. And that's why we're saying both the commission and I think his Justice Department coming here asking for Social Security
That's not
numbers,
unsubstantiated.
driver's licenses,
That's not an
and other private
unsubstantiated
information,
It's very
other
frivolous.
private information, not only in Georgia, but across the nation. 41 states have said we're not going to turn over the information you've asked for.
It's actually,
and
it's
rightfully
actually-
so.
You say there's no fraud? I can't believe you're actually saying something like that.
He said that there were millions of people who voted illegally. That statement
I know what
has
he
yet
said.
to be
I know what he
substantiated.
said. What are you saying? There's no fraud?
I'm saying
I think it's somewhere in the middle.
I'm saying that's an unsubstantiated
Well,
statement. He can't prove it, and neither can you.
But that's why we have to investigate.
That's
because
why he wants to investigate.
There is proof of fraud in this state and other states. I don't know the
We got
numbers.
to get out. We didn't even get to the nut graph on that, which is the 6th district runoff. So we'll just take a break, and we'll come back and we'll ask, at what point will Democrats accept the results of an election? Because if they're not accepting the results in the 6th, they're from another planet. Well, they're from Colorado. That's another planet. They smoke too much. When we return.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at fox5atlanta.com.
So to try and bring some clarity to this during the commercial break, we realized that we just talked all around the issue. One of the issues is that poor Brian Kemp, Secretary of State, is trying to run for governor. He's got more requests for voter data and more accusations of bad computer systems than you can imagine. And the lead in all of this really is a group from Colorado, including 4 Georgia Republicans hitched to it, who want to examine whether the 6th congressional district runoff, that monumental election of all elections, was rigged. Because as I understand it, Theron, help me, the big computer center at Kennesaw State University had a breach. Is that?
Well, that is
Does that
true.
affect my vote in the Montgomery precinct?
Look, I think I'll go on the record and say, as a Democrat, listen, John Ossoff lost and we got to get over it. However, is that this Secretary of State, we've had some issues in the past with purging, as we just talked about in the last block. But also, if you look at what happened with the data breach in Kennesaw State, that did raise a lot of concerns for not just people in Georgia, but nationally. But I think to kind of, really get to your point is that this is a point in time where I think, to Jeff's point, that this president really wants to go out here and ignite his base and create this whole baseless and fearless notion that there's this amazing amount of voter fraud that's going on across the country and just has no factual evidence to back it up. Now, this group out of Colorado, I think they need to probably just understand that we had a fair and proper election in the 6th district. Ossoff ran the best campaign he could run, but Karen Handel is now the congresswoman, and I think we just got to move on from it.
Yeah, it's amazing, and I want to know the names of those Republicans. Well, I do, because I've heard one of them might be a gubernatorial candidate, and I couldn't track it down in time for our taping. All right, let's move on. It's a subject we took up last week, which I think is going to get legs, just like transit with the Speaker, and that's property tax relief. And John Albers had a meeting a week ago, state senator from Roswell, looking at ways to cap property taxes, specifically in Fulton County, but I think statewide, huh?
Well, that's right. In fact, the model he's going to use, Dick, is in DeKalb County, where they have, as you know, Jeff, a 3% cap. And so I think this is, again, in response to public outrage over what happened.
Are you sure of that?
That's what his press release said.
Yeah, but I think DeKalb, Jeff, has a freeze on property tax
And
at 3%.
increases.
It is a freeze.
Oh, it's at 3%.
Yes.
It's a freeze.
Right.
It is a freeze.
Exactly right.
Okay.
Wow,
Well, I'm gonna
lower
be
taxes in
clarified.
DeKalb County. Whoever would have thought it?
Yeah, but it makes sense. So where I was hoping Albers was going was an exemption for seniors.
Well, he is. That's another part of the bill, too.
I don't think he's doing that, though, from what I've heard.
He's floated it out, as you mentioned last week.
But at his meeting, he didn't pursue it.
No, it was more the cap.
I don't think that there will be any such exemption for seniors.
But
I
there
don't
are
think
in
that
several
most,
metro counties.
I don't think that most areas can afford them. And I'm not so sure that we need General Assembly interference in Fulton County's affairs. Fulton County had a board of assessors that went out, assessed property. Maybe they did it belatedly, but they got it done, right? And it raised some people's property taxes like yours. I understand that, Bill. But there's a mechanism, as we've said before on this show, to lower those assessments. Use that mechanism. Why do we need the state legislature to come in with their heavy hand and tell boards of assessors across the state of Georgia, and county commissions what to do. They know how to do their job.
And you're referring, of course, to lowering the millage rate, and I think most people would agree with you on that. Jeff, the problem goes deeper, and that is the flawed data. I mean, you had at least 90 identified neighborhoods that were totally out of whack. Even the Board of Assessors in Fulton admits that
but there's
the
an
data
appeals
was flawed.
process. If you've got
They figured out they couldn't do it. There were so many.
That's right.
But we should,
that's right.
But
Jeff.
we should put in some exemption for seniors. Many of these people who got these high tax bills were senior citizens in this county that primarily are on fixed income. And so, to Jeff's point, is that we do have a Board of Assessors that need to do a better job of communicating with the public and the citizens early enough. And the other problem we have is that people don't trust the data. And so if you don't have this public trust around the data, and then therefore seniors are being the ones that are actually being hurt the most, it's just a really big problem. I think it's going to get
They're
legs.
the ones who can be forced out of their homes.
Exactly.
Plain and simple.
And I think that we got to show some sensitivity and some understanding towards them.
Now, one of the AJC's dreams through the years, I remember a memo from 2 editors ago at the AJC. It was a staff memo. It wasn't intended to become public, but it crowed over the fact that Gwinnett County was going to become Democratic because of demographic change. It was really one of the most ill-considered memos a newspaper editor could write. But it is happening now. And guess what? As Gwinnett trends Democratic, they're going to raise taxes. It's just inevitable. The Gwinnett County Commission has agreed to a 12% increase in the millage rate. Really? Well, what possibly? They said they got to make up for the recession. They got to make their salaries more competitive. A 12% tax hike?
Well, and of course, part of that is the
Trump got elected, not the other guy.
I agree with you. I wouldn't. If I lived there, I'd be opposed to it. But the county has grown, and that is and of course fueled in large measure by illegal immigration.
Correct.
By the way.
And I'm having a large
And you have to pay for the services.
I'm having a hard time seeing the difference, the connection between raising the millage rate 12% and trending Democratic. The last time I looked, it was not Democratic, at least not the people who are raising.
No, these are Republicans raising the taxes.
Well, thank you. I just wanted to clarify.
No, they
that
are.
point.
But they must see the Democrats coming.
No. I think that we should just put the onus where it belongs, on the people who are raising the taxes, and they're actually Republicans, not Democrats.
Well, they've been reading too many memos and too many news stories about demographic change. All right, we got to get out. Good, because that means we won't have to talk about this new problem of school principals having affairs with teachers in low-performing schools. Oddest story ever.
But Dick, don't sit up here and act like these affairs, which are, left up to these grown-ups, only happen in failing schools. I mean,
I know, but that's what the story said.
Yeah, but that story was very, very biased. And
well, that's
very
what I mean. It was just
I agree. That was a slanted story.
Yeah, very slanted story.
I agree.
It was. It happens everywhere,
I
not
saw
just
that.
between
Yeah.
teachers and principals.
And it happens
Sometimes even
between,
students are
hopefully
involved.
between consenting adults,
Right.
not students. But
Right.
yeah, because that was very negative and
So the
slanted
point
story.
is, we all agree it was a slanted story.
And we talked about it despite my reservation. All right, when we come back, money in politics. The previously mentioned Brian Kemp actually knows how to raise money, too. Stay with us.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at fox5atlanta.com.
All right, let's talk about politics. Let's talk about money in politics. The reason we do that, Theron always reminds us that a sign of a candidate's credibility is money raised.
Absolutely.
Last week, we reported the Republican candidate for governor, Hunter Hill, state senator, had raised $1 million. Brian Kemp, the Secretary of State, now seeking to become the Republican nominee, raised $1.7 million. That's fairly impressive, is it not?
Of course.
He's going to need all of that to defend his
And Casey
record.
Cagle, the presumed front runner, has got
We'll
a huge,
probably have a lot more than
He's
that.
got a huge war chest. We're looking at the numbers. And then, of course, there's a fourth candidate, Michael Williams.
Right. And on the Democratic side, I don't hear much money talk. Stacey Abrams, Stacey Evans, I haven't heard any of that discussion. When's the next reporting
Well,
date?
as we actually taped, we didn't get the numbers. We'll know next show. But I think that roughly, listen, Abrams has been running for governor for a long time. She's expected to have a high number. I think if she doesn't have a high number, I think it'll be disappointing. But Evans has only started as of June, and so she will have had 30 days to really raise money. She had to come out of the legislature, actually file. And so I think that we won't see huge numbers as we see on the Republican side, but I think both of them will have enough money to get their message out.
And what was America's Seam Reed doing when he other than being very polite, when he said he met with Stacey Evans, I got to say it, the white Democrat, and said that he could feel her, that he really liked her passion and her ideas. I mean, it sounded kind of like an endorsement of Stacey Evans to me.
I think I tried to allude to this as gently as possible last week. You all are trying to make some sort of racial alignment on the Democratic side, and you can't. It doesn't exist. You're going to see prominent African Americans supporting Stacey Abrams and prominent African Americans supporting Stacey Abrams. Did I say that right? Evans and Abrams. Both. Both is the point.
Which is why I put race in it, because I distinguish between the Stacey's.
I
One's white,
see
one's
your
black.
point, and I think you will have what you're saying, but what Stacey Abrams said 2 weeks ago, taking a jab at former Governor Roy Barnes by saying, you know, this isn't 1998 when you won with all these white votes, and essentially we don't need these white votes. That's what got Abrams in trouble.
I would attribute that only to a talking point, Phil, and nothing.
Well, that was in Jim Galloway's AJC column. If you want to go back and read that.
Should I read anything into Kasim Reed's comments about Stacey
I
Evans?
totally agree with Jeff. Listen, and I said it in the AJC article that you referenced, is that every person who decides who they're going to support, one of the Staceys in this Democratic primary, is going to be based on the premises of who is best to go and face the Republican nominee, who may be Michael Williams, for governor in 2018.
No relation.
But the other thing the Democrats have got to do is that we got to talk about race. Unlike the Republican Party, we've been talking about race in our party for over 100 years. It's not something that Republicans are very comfortable talking about because they don't really have many people of color.
No, that's ridiculous.
That's true. I mean, you can't name me one elected official in the state of Georgia as a person of color that represents the Republican Party on a constitutional.
The Republican Party has recruited more minorities, and Trump brought in a bunch of minorities, which you don't like.
But to Jeff's point, I think that we as Democrats are not going to fall in this Republican trap of wanting to get into this race conversation. We have 2 qualified women who are running for office, and they're going to run good campaigns.
All right, what about the mayor's race in Atlanta? We keep getting the governor's race ahead of the mayor's race. I guess it's because there's so many candidates.
Yeah.
But there has been some movement. Mary Norwood announced that she's raised $1 million, and yet Peter Amon was endorsed by Yolanda Adrian, the councilwoman from Buckhead,
and Claire Muller, the
and
former
by
councilwoman.
Claire Muller, the longtime stalwart from Buckhead.
Yes.
I don't know what to read into all that. It's just that there is a mayor's race.
Well, there's a lot of interconnecting alliances and relationships
absolutely, and these are folks who've represented that side, north side of Atlanta, for a long time, and have known Mary Norwood very well, and have elected to endorse her opponent. I think that it's significant.
You got to get out. But Theron, I want to ask you a prediction since we've got you here. How many candidates in the end will qualify for mayor, really?
I think you'll probably have at least anywhere between 7 to 9 that will actually qualify. But a breaking point in this race is going to come next week. We're going to know where everyone stands on the money. You know, when I looked at the polls and where Kasim Reed was 8 years ago, he was still in the single digits, but he had a good fundraising quarter. That's when he just decided to, really start to make his stride. I think that you'll probably have 7 to 8 that qualify, and then the race will come down to about maybe 4 candidates. I mean, Mary Norwood right now, unless she just does something colossally, just stupid, unethical, she's in a good position to make it to the runoff. The real true battle is who's going to go on to face her in that December runoff.
I think that's a good analysis.
That was an excellent analysis.
Yeah, I agree with that.
All right, we've got to get out. When we come back, we will declare, as we always do, winners and losers.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
And I'm just going to jump it because it hadn't been much of the news. Christopher Wray of Atlanta has hearings next week to see if he can confirmed as the new director of the FBI. Just pointing that out. Jeffrey, what do you have?
I don't have a whole lot of winners and losers. I don't even think I have a loser this week, other than obviously our president's a loser every week. And we got some new economic numbers out there that show that economic growth and that Trump bump that everybody's talking about doesn't exist.
That's fake news.
And
that
that's fake news.
Friday
Is that fake news too?
Friday morning,
what about the fact
corrected.
that we, in the first quarter, we had 1.6% economic growth? Is that fake news too?
You'll see it by the time.
No, you're right on that, but you're wrong on the jobs.
But my winner has got to be Atlanta United. You always do sports. I want to do sports. Atlanta United.
Good.
I mean, they've got so much energy. There's a lot of enthusiasm in this town building for a soccer team, and it's really cool. Folks should go out to Bobby Dodd if they could get.
And their nickname is the Five Stripes, and it's named after Theron. for his socks.
And they broke an attendance record as well. Atlanta United early on.
Lead the league in Atlanta. They lead the league. All right. That's you. Okay.
That's me.
How about you, Theron?
So winner is DeKalb County and Michael Thurman. You know, we can't have a discussion on this panel without talking about DeKalb County.
Thank you.
In the commission. Cleaned the sewers, hadn't been done in 50 years. Basically, you know, he got about 2,600 miles of sewer capacity there in DeKalb County, so big shout out to him. And also, they're opening up an animal shelter in Chamblee. It's going to be a $12 million project in North DeKalb. And so you're going to have an animal shelter to make sure that all the animal lovers can go.
Last weekend, they're having free adoptions.
Yeah.
More than 400 dogs and cats were adopted free.
There you go.
Lines. I was amazed to see it. Lines, actually, at the animal shelter. All right, Philip?
You know, Brenda Fitzgerald is going to be the new head of the Centers for Disease Control. She's currently the Georgia Public Health Commissioner, and I think that's a great elevation. I think another winner would be Stephanie Johnson. Who is that? Well, that's a person that was just named by the state school superintendent, Richard Woods, to be their turnaround officer. Now, you remember the 2017 legislature stipulated in a bill that we have a statewide chief turnaround officer. That hasn't been named yet. I'm told that the state board is now interviewing, but that's good that we've got someone to help this turnaround officer. You know, my loser, during the 4th of July celebration downtown Atlanta, Bobby Brown, this washed up, you know, singer, he couldn't even know his lines half the time. We got some great artists here in Atlanta and in Georgia. Why would they have this washed up person?
Why are you going to go off on Bobby Brown?
It's a terrible show.
He's an icon.
Oh, gosh.
Grammy Award winning artist.
All right, my winners, my losers this week, it's so easy. 4th of July weekend in Chicago, 101 people shot. 101. And we have Rahm Emanuel writing op-eds about how to make the nation better. Really, 101 people in one weekend.
And the Atlanta murder rate is rising.
Yeah, but it's not even close. We'll see you next week on the Georgia Gang.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing in this program.